On this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by my old friend Joey the Bootmaker to talk all about fatherhood, families, and food freedom. So, Joey, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I am Joey the Bootmaker, and I am a man of many titles.
Awesome, including father, bootmaker, and father.
Exactly. That about covers it.
Perfect. Well, we're going to talk through quite a few things tonight. We're kind of going a little bit by the seat of our pants here because I wanted Joey to come on so that we can just have a laid back episode, just talking about everything from fatherhood to families to food freedom. So that being said, last week I had Will from Renaissance of Men on the podcast, and we talked all about the manosphere as well as just masculinity in the church. And a theme that I kept noticing was just the manosphere. A lot of these male influencers really seem to have an issue with fatherhood and specifically seem to discourage becoming fathers. So I wanted to actually start by showing this video of pro-life activist Lila Rose. She was on the Whatever podcast. And for those of you who don't know, the Whatever podcast is a podcast that focuses mostly on dating and relationships. Typically, they have a range of guests, many of which are young women who have very modern takes on what dating should look like. Oftentimes, they are very controversial takes that I would not agree with or subscribe to. But occasionally, they have individuals like Lila Rose on to kind of give a counter perspective. But with her was also a gentleman that the show described as a top 1% kind of man. I'm not going to say he's part of the manosphere. I don't know if he would call himself a part of the manosphere, but he's definitely in that limelight of being a online influencer is how I would probably describe him, who very much has a focus on high performance and success in business. That being said, I wanted to go ahead and play parts of their interactions and Lila's appearance on the podcast to kind of kick off our conversation. So I'll go ahead and play this first part here, Joey, and I'll get your reaction.
Can I ask you one more question?
Fire away, honey.
Okay. If you have only one place in your heart for one woman, or you want to have one woman in your heart, I think you said, why don't you just commit to one and choose to be faithful to her?
I'm just not wired that way. I spent my whole 20s trying to fix myself. Thought something was
You're a man
wrong
of
with
self-control. You work out, you do business.
Yeah.
You can possess your own power and direct it the way you want to direct it.
It's just not how I am. It's not how I am.
Do you think that might be a limited mindset?
I think it's none of your business, but I don't want you to think I'm triggered by you. I'm not.
Okay.
I saw somebody say that, and I think that's interesting. I think you're annoying, but I'm not triggered. You know what I'm saying? No, you are. You're annoying in like this goody two-shoes type way, and that's fine. I'm going to live my life on my terms, unapologetically, like truly. So you can ask me this 85 different ways. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm going to walk out of here the same man.
Well, Joey, do you think he's triggered?
I would say so.
What was your initial reaction to that?
She didn't really even push too much of an argument, to be honest with you. I didn't think her pushback was too harsh, and I'd say he needs to be able to reason with her a little more than he did. So yeah, I would say he's triggered.
Yeah, I think what's funny about this interaction is that here you have this guy that's this high performing man, and then he gets a little bit of pushback from this small woman who just has these more traditional belief system and that she follows. And the fact that she kind of immediately got to the root of this sort of facade that this guy had. Now, I'm not trying to attack this guy because I don't know him very well by any means. I did a little bit of a search on him, and he does have an online presence, and he's got a successful business, and he's making a lot of money, and good for him. Nothing wrong with making money. I don't begrudge people making a profit. But what I thought was interesting is she immediately called him on the fact that he keeps talking about how he wants one woman, and then the moment that she asks him to commit, he gets so triggered to the point where he says it's none of your business. And it's like, you're on a dating podcast. I think you talking about your relationships and people asking you questions about your relationship was something you should have expected coming into this podcast. But that's just where my mind originally went. But Joey, what do you think of this trend that we see with individuals like this gentleman and um, people who kind of subscribe to that lifestyle of career over everything, and them just not wanting to settle down and have kids?
Well, I'd say they're going to spend a lot of their life feeling kind of miserable and maybe a lack of purpose, um, because having fun and having money only get you so far. I mean, of course, above all, as we know, a relationship with Christ above all is going to bring you ultimate satisfaction. But some of those other key important gifts that he gives us to be able to enjoy on earth, being family and having children, are certainly better than earthly possession. Satisfaction you get from those.
Yeah. So you're a new father, as am I, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your initial experience to becoming a dad. What was kind of that first feeling when you first held your little one?
Well, let's see. I think actually I was a little more overwhelmed when I realized, because we didn't know the sex of our baby, and it was a boy, and there was a little bit more of an overwhelm when I found out it was a boy, because a little more weight on my shoulders, I feel like, to be an example of a godly father, and to raise him up right. I mean, there's obviously that with a girl as well, but I feel like as a father, that's more of a protector role. You're still, and being, yeah, a good father figure, but a little bit different, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know if you can have any comment on that. You haven't had a boy yet, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where, from a man's perspective, and just a lot of the psychology that's been done on the mind of men, there's a really important role that a father has in bringing their son up into manhood and sort of giving them that initial sort of a initiation, honestly, into manhood. And that's something that only the father can really provide. Now, other men, of course, can be substitutes for that. I'm not saying that you can't find that sort of initiation into manhood from like a coach or a teacher or some other form of mentor. But of course, when the father is in the picture, it should be his role. And I think that is a weighty responsibility as a man to know that you are essentially responsible in this really formative part of your son's life in a way that that really can impact how he views God the Father for the rest of his life. And I'm assuming that's kind of what you were getting at with your initial take on that fatherhood role.
definitely, yeah. There was also kind of a flood of everything that I regret in my life, past sins and whatnot. I'm all hit with those, and how much I want to be able to help him avoid making the same mistakes that I have.
Absolutely. And we're in a culture that unfortunately is going to be constantly assaulting our young children with perverse ideologies and just lifestyles that are not pleasing to the
Right.
Lord. So I wanted to just talk a little bit, Joey, about how you and your wife and the life that you've been building is very much more traditional. You know, we hear talk about the trad wives and the just trad families, and you know, I've heard a lot of people say that we shouldn't call them trad wives, we should call them, you know, biblical womanhood, or you know, or
I
other
had to
terms
look
like
up
that.
what trad wife meant.
Well, it's a good thing that it's not.
Is that a Gen Z thing?
It seems to be just a recent internet phenomenon, and if you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter and other social media, you probably would have missed it.
Okay.
But ultimately, for those who don't know, then to back up, trad wife is just a way of saying traditional wife, traditional minded, usually a stay at home wife, someone who cooks and cleans for the family while the husband is at work is typically what we would call a trad family, trad wife. and there seems to be a rising trend in it. And a lot of people have been pushing back, saying that it just needs to be labeled biblical womanhood, for example. I don't think there's anything unbiblical about having a career, of course, but it is interesting to see this rising trend. So, Joey, your family would be much more traditional in your mindset. So, what kind of things drew you into living a more traditional lifestyle?
Well, maybe part of it kind of stemmed from having an interest in the past and old ways of doing things, and I'm very hands on, and my wife is as well, in that she likes cooking and baking and some, I guess, yeah, some of those traditional feminine, more feminine wife slash mother type roles. And this also kind of uh, intersected with us rethinking how we eat too. And that has gone to us eating in more traditional ways, using more whole foods to make stuff from scratch. And along with that, getting rid of television and other more so modern noises in our life. Um,
Hmm.
it'd be hard for me to pinpoint a turning moment where all that happened. It's kind of been gradual.
Hmm. So, not having a TV in the house is something that is almost completely unheard of in today's day and age. So, how would you say that that has helped you guys, just on a daily basis, with connecting with one another, connecting with life around you?
Well, for the two of us, that's probably a little bit. That was a little bit easier for both of us. We're not big watchers, anyways, um, and I'm not gonna lie that our phones aren't still a struggle to not be on. Um, I bought my house before we were married, and I never had a TV, so it was just kind of an easy transition.
Hmm.
When we got married and Julian moved in to stay that way. So a lot of evenings we're just on our couch reading books or chatting, and yeah, it's been good. Uh, I think we realize how glad we are to not have it in the house when we go out to eat somewhere and they have sports or whatever, something we're not even interested in up
Yeah.
on the wall, and your eyes just drift up to it, and
Yeah.
you can't even control it.
It's amazing. You don't even notice how quickly you kind of just become a goldfish staring at a shiny object when a screen is shoved in front of you, when you don't have such access to screens just on a day-to-day basis. It's funny how much more they stand out to you when you finally get an opportunity to go to a fancy restaurant. And my wife and I had the same thing. We went to a fancy restaurant not too long ago, and we made the mistake of sitting near the bar, and there were so many TV screens, and our little one was with us and just looking up at the screens in a daze. And it's just unfortunate too, because that's not what we expose her to very often, um, either. Do you feel like the pace that you guys set in your daily lives has given more room for growth, both in your relationship with each other as well as your relationship with God?
I would say so. Yeah, just less things biting for our time. Um, yeah, slowed down for sure. Man, and especially since our son has arrived, just enjoying every minute as we have it together, because being home a lot together, uh, we don't get that opportunity too much, especially the little bit of time I was able to take off. Now I'm back to work, but we're still together in the evenings. And yeah, it's really good. I'm realizing how quick time goes, and I'm wanting to take it all in.
Mm, yeah, I don't blame you. That's where I'm at, watching the time fly by so quickly. It's it's unfortunate, but it is just the curse of the fallen world that we live in. We do not get to spend eternity, at least not yet, with our loved ones. But that is why we have our hope in the next life. Um, you mentioned how you're a hands-on individual, and I've known you for years, and I've known that about you, and I've known that. you take your time in your craft, and you're involved in a lot of things. And one of them recently has been food and food freedom, as you mentioned, kind of at the top of the episode. I wanted to go ahead and first read through this story here, because this is a wild story that I wanted to get your reaction to, and we'll go from there. So, 18,000 cows killed in explosion. Fire at Texas dairy farm may be largest cattle killing ever. This is from usatoday.com. The fire spread quickly through the holding pens, where thousands of dairy cows gathered, crowded together, waiting to be milked, trapped in deadly confines. After subduing the fire at the West Texas dairy farm Monday evening, officials were stunned at the scale of livestock death left behind. 18,000 head of cattle perished in the fire at the South Fork Dairy Farm near Dimmitt, Texas, or about 20% of the cattle slaughtered in America on any given day. Wow. A dairy farm worker rescued from inside the structure was taken to a hospital and was in critical but stable condition as of Tuesday. There were no other human casualties. It's mind-boggling, Dimmitt Mayor Roger Malone said. I don't think it's ever happened before around here. It's a real tragedy. It was the biggest single incident death of cattle in the country since the Animal Welfare Institute, a Washington-based animal advocacy group, began tracking barn and farm fires in 2013. How many cows died in dairy fire? 18,000, enough for 26 football fields. So we'll stop there for now. But Joey, what was your initial reaction to this story and seeing this spontaneous combustion of 18,000 cows?
My initial reaction would be that they have a few too many animals packed into one space to take out that many cows with one fire.
That's fair. What do you think caused the fire? Because it seems like we never fully got an answer to that.
Well, yeah, that always makes you think, be it a planned thing or actually accidental. It's no secret that there's a movement to try and get us away from real food and onto stuff made from plants or bugs. So there's always that theory there too. Yeah. That'd be my take.
Just for me, I don't think I know of a single reason why a dairy farm would explode in such a way. I mean, I guess it said caught fire. Well, it says explosion and fire. I'm just double checking myself here, and definitely seems a little bit.
It's got to be from the methane. It's causing the climate change.
There we go. See, now
someone lit
we
their
all
cigarette
know.
and the whole placement went out.
Well, unfortunately, we're probably never going to know what exactly happened to these 18,000 cows. But there's been stories like this popping up all across the last year and a half, 2 years or so. That just seems to constantly make myself, at least, do a double take at our food supply chain. So I wanted to talk a little bit about food freedom and just being sovereign over your own food resources. So I know that you raise chickens, as do I. We recently just got done incubating some eggs of ours, and it went well. But Joey, first, let's kind of start with the basics. What was kind of the first things that you did to start becoming a little bit more self-reliant food-wise?
That would have started, like I said earlier, back when we started cooking more from scratch. I think that was kind of the starting point. My wife started baking a lot of our bread products. We haven't bought bread in I don't know how long. And it just went from there, kind of sourcing better ingredients. We started buying eggs from someone locally. And after about a month of doing that, we decided we wanted our own chickens. We live in the city, so what we're able to do is limited. And sometimes it makes you think, oh, well, we can't do anything here. We're just going to wait until we're able to move to property or whatever. But we've really, over the last year, just wanted to grow where we're currently planted at and take advantage of the space we are blessed with. and maximize that and actually maybe grow out of it before we move on to the next property. Or if we are stuck here, that'd be fine too. It certainly could provide a lot of our needs, with the exception of large scale meat, but we're covered on eggs and a lot of our own produce we should be able to grow, and we're expanding on that every year.
So how are you able to have chickens and yet be living in just a regular neighborhood?
Well, we're lucky that our city does allow 1 bird per 1,000 square feet of lot, and I may or may not have more than is allowed. It's kind of it's fine as long as no one complains about it. And a big key, of course, for that is I don't have a rooster. We did have a rooster, but we ate him. So that helps with the noise and smell management. As Joel Salatin says, if there's a smell, it's a sign of poor management. So using the deep litter systems to keep down on smell. And honestly, if we had a cedar fence around our yard, nobody would know they were there, except maybe in the morning when they're laying their eggs and singing their song.
So how many chickens do you have?
I've got 7 right now. Yeah, and we'd like to add a few more, but I don't want to do the chicks in the house this year because of the mess. So we're hoping we have one go broody this summer. That we can stick some
I don't
eggs
know
under.
if you heard. I don't know if the microphone picked it up, but I do have our chicks are in a brooder in the house, and one of them was mouthing off just a moment ago. So you might hear it periodically throughout the stream between a dog, a baby, and birds. There's always something to be making noises in the podcast. So
how many did you end up with?
Yeah. So we started with, so when we first got our chickens, we got 20 birds. 2 of them were roosters. We lost 1 hen because when we first moved them outside after they were in the brooder for several weeks, one of them managed to get out of their shelter and spent the whole night outside and survived, but we had to nurse that one back to health. And unfortunately, that hen never fully bounced back. We allowed the hen to live another, probably 6, 7, 8 months. Fairly normal, but she had a discolored comb, and she was always acting a little lethargic. So unfortunately, one morning I did open up the coop to see that she just died by herself, away from all the others. So most likely she just had some damage that was beyond our repair. But we gave her a good life while we could. And we had 2 roosters. We had Roderick and Jorge. I named one Roderick. My wife named Jorge after a movie that she enjoys. And unfortunately, Roderick murdered Jorge in cold blood. So for those of you who don't know, you should not have 2 roosters together. I knew that already, but they seemed to be leaving each other alone. And I thought since they grew up together, that maybe it would be an exception because they grew up with all the hens. So there was no odd interactions that I could see. It seemed like Jorge was king of the coop and constantly put Roderick in his place. And then one day, apparently Roderick was biding his time, and we came out and Jorge's back was snapped. So it was a brutal way to go, but Roderick is now king of the coop, and the reign of Roderick continues on. So now that being said, we had Roderick. Clearly, he is a champion of the people. So we started saving his fertilized eggs, and we took 40 eggs in our incubator, and we ended up with 15 hatched. But unfortunately, we had to put one out of its misery today because it hatched, and unfortunately, it seems it was not meant to be. It had some issues. I can't quite tell what it. I think it might have had a broken neck, like it developed wrong inside the egg, because it could not move properly. So unfortunately, we had to put it out of its misery. But we have 14 good ones that are now alive and well in the brooder. So
excellent.
Yeah. So, Joey, are you going to be incubating any eggs?
Well, probably not at this point. Like I said, if I was able to do 15 plus chicks in a brooder, it'd probably be worth it. But just doing a few in the house, it's just not worth the mess and the hassle for me. So, like I said, if we get a broody hen, I'll probably call up someone who has a rooster and get some eggs from them in hopes that we can have her sit on some eggs and hatch them out. I'm not sure too how the integration process will work too. That's the other thing I don't really want to deal with, moving chicks from the brooder in with the other flock, because I don't have room on our city lock to kind of have them separate. Eventually, I would like to have kind of rotate through every 3 years and cull my 3-year-olds and get a new batch.
Yeah. You need to get it like a big dog kennel or something. That way they can
Yeah.
see each other and be introduced for a few weeks before they're actually able to interact with one another, and go from there. Shara Joel in the chat said, "Sounds like a hate crime to me," referring to Jorge being murdered in cold blood by Roderick. I agree, Shara. But the reign of Roderick, it still reigns supreme. So it excuse me, it is what it is. Yeah, Joey, what other things do you think just the average person can be doing to become a little bit more sovereign with their own food supply? Like, for example, you have chickens, so how would someone go about having chickens if they're say in an apartment? Is that even a possibility, or are they going to have to scrap the idea altogether? Maybe just give some advice to people who live in an apartment versus someone who lives in a suburb, to someone who maybe has a plot of land that can actually go do a miniature homestead on.
Mm-hmm. Man, to do it well, I think it would be a little bit difficult to do chickens in an apartment. Like I said about the proper management of smells and stuff, you can't haul, assuming you're living in like a New York City apartment or whatever, even a apartment here in the Northwest where I live, where it's only maybe a three-story apartment, on your little patio or whatever, you might have a hard time. You might be able to have 2 chickens, and I think for the trouble you're going to have keeping smell down and whatnot, it's probably not going to be worth your while for the 7 eggs a week you get from those 2 birds. And in that case, I'd recommend looking. Farmers markets are a good option to get to know people around you who have farms and are able to provide you with good eggs. But doing your homework and actually visiting their farms and seeing their operations and making sure they're not just selling grocery store eggs in a relabeled box with a cute label on it, or produce that's grocery store produce, same stuff you're going to buy at the grocery store. That's an easy way to start. Lettuce, growing lettuce in a pot. Now, I'll warn you that once you start growing some of that stuff, you're not going to be able to eat the grocery store stuff again. And that's
Yeah.
part of that is eating seasonally too, man. I haven't eaten lettuce in months. I was bummed. We haven't started ours yet, and the farmers market started up this last week, and I was really hoping there was going to be lettuce. And I was disappointed that no one had lettuce yet. So that's where I'd get started there. Plants are probably a good first step, I would think.
Yeah.
Because of the lower startup cost. You can plant vegetables directly in a bag of potting soil if you want to. But man, yeah, if you're living in a city or even renting and can negotiate with your landlord, I always would recommend make sure, if it's not where you're planning on staying planted long term, make sure your infrastructure is temporary and you can move it with you, because materials are expensive right now. But initial investment really isn't too bad if you're scrappy with it. I was lucky in that my shed in my backyard is split into 2 parts. There's the original half that I believe was built as a playhouse, and then the second half, which is the larger part where I keep my lawnmower and stuff. But that back half, we converted into my chicken coop. So that was free, with the exception of some hardware and stuff, some to attach some scrap wood that I had laying around to cover up the framing on the inside.
Right.
Aside from that, my only cost was building my chicken run, which I went a little cheaper on, being that this isn't where we're hoping to stay long term. I just used what do they call, furring strips, kind of cheaper, like 1x3s and 1x2s at Home Depot. They're maybe $3 or $4 each. I think I was able to buy all the lumber for my chicken run for around $80, not including the 4 fence posts I found in the attic of my garage. And then hardware. Honestly, your hardware cloth, your hardware wire is going to be, I think your fencing is your most expensive part generally. I haven't tried any electric fencing or whatnot, but that's a good option too. I know you have some experience with that. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I did on my end is when it came time to create a chicken coop, my wife and I were blessed. There was basically a busted up cabinet that I shouldn't say busted up. It was in good condition, but it was old. That was left at the house when we purchased it. So we were able to use that for our chicken coop. So our main actual physical shelter for the chickens was free. And then we had a carport that we put them underneath. And I actually built up some boards around the sides and turned the whole thing into basically a giant trough that I filled up with wood chips. And for those of you who don't know, when chicken poops, that's nitrogen. And so you need a lot of carbon to absorb that, to keep the smell down, as well as to keep disease away. And then when you mix in just oxygen, you got your oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and that is some great fertile stuff for your garden. So my wife and I will actually scoop some of that out there and put it on our garden. And our garden our garden soil has been improving every single year since we've been using some of those regenerative practices. And so definitely worth doing. But to your point about the fence, we decided to go with a permanet poultry netting. It's electric and it's mobile. So we actually have a solar panel that powers the whole thing, and it wraps around the chicken coop in that carport. And so it is stationary for now, but I can make it mobile if I wanted them to actually go about and graze on our grass. And sometimes what I will do is I have enough extra length of this poultry netting that I actually will occasionally extend a chicken run in multiple different directions. So I can actually give them a chicken run and then switch it up every couple days. That way they don't they don't burn the grass by putting too much nitrogen into the soil. Gives it a little bit of a break, but it allows our grass to get some nutrients from the chickens, which actually helps the soil become more fertile. And of course, as the soil becomes more fertile, it becomes more practical for future usage, whether that be for other grazing animals or for future gardens. So, but either way, that poultry netting, it really works, and it's a little bit of an investment. I think we were out about $500 all in all, but that's including the solar panel that can be used for any additional electric netting.
Can you power multiple nets at once with that?
You can. That was the other thing I was going to say. That's also including the netting itself. And if I was to buy just netting, it'd be maybe half that to double what netting size I have, and I can connect them together so that one solar panel can power all of that. So I can have hundreds and hundreds worth of square footage, all with the one setup that I have right now. If I was to just add on maybe a little bit more of the netting.
Excellent. Yeah, I think if I had to do it all over again, / had a little more space, to be honest, I'd probably go that way. And I think if I didn't already have that pre-existing shed that I was able to convert, or what I will do at our next place is I think I'll have a mobile coop that I can move around with mesh bottom so the poop falls out while they're roosting. Do a Justin Rhodes chickshaw type thing.
Oh, perfect. Or like a cruiser from Harvey Usery, the chicken
Exactly.
cruiser in the
Yeah.
garden. So, have you used your
Because
chickens in the garden yet?
I have a little bit. It's a little bit of a pain because I don't have a good permanent like tractor setup. I'd like to build one, but again, it's just another thing I have to store and have room for. But I have some kind of like cage panels that I'm able to set up on my garden. The hardest part is they're not easy to move. But when we're out there working, we'll throw all the chickens in there, and then I have some lattice that I just lay over the top for a roof to keep them in, and they scratch up the garden.
And what kind of breeds do you have?
Works good. Oh yeah, we got a mix, which maybe was a mistake because we can tell them apart, and you kind of learn their personalities and get attached to some of them. So next house, when we have a larger flock, I'll probably do maybe just 2 heritage breeds. So they're mixed a little bit better, and it's easier to call them out when they get older. But
Right.
I have some Barred Rocks, 2 of those, 2 Rhode Island Reds, both kind of your classic
Right.
heritage breeds. And then we have a Moran cross that lays nice dark brown eggs. Not anything super spectacular, just hatchery grade Morans. And our olive egger cross chicken that doesn't lay olive eggs, which was a disappointment. But yeah.
Out of those, which ones have you been most happy with?
Oh, let's see. It's funny because we have those Morans and their eggs are beautiful dark brown, but one of them has like chronic diarrhea, and it's the most obnoxious thing because it makes the coop wet. That we figured it's been since she was little, and we figured she was going to die, and she's healthy. She just drinks a lot of water, and it's obnoxious because it makes the coop moist, the bedding. But she's our best producer. She's one of our best producers, so I can't get rid of her. So I like those, but man, any of those, probably the ones that produced the soonest from chick to laying were the Barred Rocks. I had a Barred Rock lay first, and then I think it was a Rhode Island second. So I'd recommend heritage breeds. You really can't go wrong with them. They've been around for a long time. It is fun to have some different colors in there, but strictly for production, I'd probably go with a flock of Barred Rocks.
That's interesting. And I have Rhode Island Reds, and I obviously can't speak to Barred Rock as well because I have never had any in my flock. But how do they do with the winter? Because, of course, you live up in the Pacific Northwest, so you have much colder winters there.
Yep. Yeah, we had a week of negative, just single digits. I think there might have been some double digits at night with wind chill. And they fared great. Like I said, I have them in the coop with the deep litter and no supplemental heat, and they fared just fine. A little tiny bit of frostbite on the tips of the combs, which maybe might be a little bit unavoidable just because of when they're breathing. It's a little bit of moisture that can collect on there. But overall, they fared great, and they didn't care if they were outside. They didn't stay inside.
So you mean you didn't give them a heat lamp to
no
last through the winter?
Heat, nothing.
So explain that to our audience who don't know, because conventional wisdom, most people will think
give them a heat lamp. Well, first of all, I'd say main concern probably would be the fire hazard. You have feathers and wood chips floating in a coop with a. Do you know how hot those bulbs get? They get. I would think
have one
if they
in our brooder right
they
now, and I had to move it today, and it burned me.
Fire. Yeah.
It burned me, and it was not. I wasn't even touching the bulb. I was just touching the shield around the bulb. So they must get. I mean, obviously hot enough to start a fire. So
right. Well, I know last year when we had the brooder, I had a thermometer hung under it where I was adjusting the height of the lamp to keep a consistent 80 degrees or whatever, and I think I had it up. Man, 30 inches off the floor, and the thermometer on the floor was reading 85 degrees. So yeah, they get hot. And yeah, if it's the winter and it's cold, you may have a chicken that they want to get closer to the heat and jumps up towards the lamp, and the lamp falls down, especially if you just have it clamped, which,
Yep.
Yeah, you have yourself a good recipe for a little backyard fire and losing all your chickens. Second would be you get your chickens acclimated to having a heat lamp and they become dependent on it. You lose power, and you have frozen chickens because they're not used to acclimating to the cold or the sudden change, I should say, from having that heat lamp. Maybe just keeping them a few degrees warmer, because obviously a heat lamp's not going to warm up a coop to 60, 70 degrees or whatever. You're still probably going to be if you're in the freezing range, the 20s or whatever, maybe you'll get up towards 30 if you have a really great insulated coop, but that shock can pose problems.
So what you're saying is that chickens need to go through some hard times and get a little bit of frostbite so that when harder times come, they don't completely freeze to death. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely. Yeah.
The wisdom of chickens.
I think your chickens last longer if you don't baby them too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got people they buy treats for their chickens, and they feed back most of their eggs to their chickens, and their chickens are always getting egg bound or sour crop or whatever. I think practicing good management and just letting them be chickens, and man, I haven't had any issues with mine, aside from, like I said, the one that has some irregularities, but is otherwise normal. Just would be a bird that I wouldn't use as a breeding stock.
So basically the saying is that strong chickens create good times create
Weak chickens.
Weak chickens create bad times, and bad times create strong chickens.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what the saying says. So I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
Well, another point I wanted to touch on too was the feeding the chickens. Finding if you are able to, highly recommend finding, if you have a good local feed mill that does non-GMO. We're lucky enough to have one nearby that does non-GMO corn and soy free, and no canola or canola oil, which is hard to find even with some of the non-GMO options. And they always have feed for us when Tractor Supply may not, or Tractor Supply feed may have problems, and Tractor Supply feed has GMO corn and soy in it.
Yep.
I do wonder if some of that could contribute to the good health as well, because what we have is just good grains that are organic. They're not organic certified because we don't need a government label on our bag. But good quality stuff. We know where it's coming from, and we know the people behind it, and we feel good about giving them our money, and it just works out all around.
Why don't you want your chickens to be eating canola oil?
Well, we don't use seed oils ourselves, so I figure we probably don't want our chickens to be eating them if we're going to be consuming their eggs. That's one I have to research a little bit more, because we're looking for someone to provide us with meat chickens this year, and our usual source is full that feeds feed from the same feed mill that we get our feed from. But we were looking into another farm, but their feed source, it's GMO free, but they do have canola oil as an ingredient. So I need to look into that a little bit more. Granted, it's still probably better than buying soy fed, corn fed stuff from the grocery store. Even the organic stuff. That's, I think we went out of our way. We were buying chicken at Costco, and some friends told us, "Oh, you got to go to the natural grocers. They have this pastured chicken." And it's the label says pasture raised heritage breeds, and so we bought one, and I go onto their website to see what they're all about, and it shows their feeding rations, and it was like a 40% soy and 60% corn diet.
So basically, it's organic. It's just not the kind of organic that you want. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, and I get a laugh too when they say vegetarian fed and cage free, because if you know chickens, if they're outside, you can't claim vegetarian fed. So if they're claiming vegetarian fed and cage free, you know they're shoulder to shoulder, probably inside a dark building.
Right. Cage free usually just means we don't have them in a cage, but they still are constantly in the dark, or even if they're not in the dark, they'll
On
say
top
it's
of 3 inches of manure,
right.
dead
Poorly managed
chickens.
factory farm. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about small scale, decentralized, well managed farming, which is what actually can go about healing land and ecosystems and environmental issues, which brings me to this. So, from notthebee.com, St. Greta Thunberg awarded honorary doctorate in theology from Helsinki University, because why the heck not? The University of Helsinki, I'm going to keep saying that wrong, in Finland has announced its list of honorary doctorates to be given in 2023, and making the list is everyone's favorite Swedish high school dropout and climate cult leader, Greta Thunberg. She is receiving a doctorate in theology for her work as an activist. And you can see Disclosed TV, for those that are watching audio only, has a wonderful picture of Greta with the angel wings and angel halo. And Not to be said, well, we told you, climate worship is a religion, and Greta Thunberg is the high priestess of Gaia, a saint goddess who represents Mother Earth. So this makes a lot of sense if you look at it through those lenses. She's as venerated a figure among the climate church as Mary, the mother of Christ. Megan Basham, you can see here, tweeted, of course, Greta Thunberg is getting an honorary doctorate in theology because what she's selling is a religion. So how should Christians view the church leaders who are trying to convince us we should mix her religion with ours? Joey, what are your initial thoughts on Greta receiving that doctorate in theology?
Well, I think it's silly to begin with, and I'd want to know, do you know what kind of a school this is in Finland?
I can't say I know much about the university other than where it's located, but
I'd say not a theologically sound university.
I'm sure it's not. That's for sure. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be recommended by by my church anytime soon. But
yeah.
Shara Joel said, as if we didn't already know that honorary doctorates were crap. Yeah, thank goodness they made leaps and bounds to make sure that we knew that you should not take honorary doctorates seriously. Yeah. Now, we haven't talked too much about this yet, Joey, but can you talk a little bit about what holistic regenerative homesteading can do for actually healing soil, healing land, and why it's a bunch of malarkey that Greta Thunberg wants the cows to stop farting?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's back to the proper management, like earlier with the chickens. We could go on for hours and hours probably about it, which may be a future topic if enough interest, perhaps. But working together with planting your crops along with the animals, followed by another animal, to both cancel out parasites from the animals as well as replenish the topsoil with all the nutrient density that the manures and whatnot give to it. Because, man, yeah, with our general, what's the word I'm looking for? Conventional agriculture model, where you're tilling and spraying fertilizer and killing off all the microorganisms and bugs and things. We're wrecking our soil. We're making it hard, and aren't we losing? How much? Do you know how much topsoil we're losing on average?
Let me look it up, because I was
whatever?
just thinking about that, but I believe it's only like an inch or two, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you actually think about what topsoil is, it's incredible. how much an inch can make a big difference if we just lose an inch of topsoil. But continue on while I look that up.
Well, and really with good management, building topsoil, it doesn't, I mean, obviously it takes a while to build up a significant amount. But with the example of my chickens, I put them on wood chips, and they turn that in 6 months into a noticeable amount of dirt. That's good, nutrient dense compost, essentially, that can be transferred right to a garden. Or if I wanted to, if I had a coop that was mobile, I could just move my run and I'd have a fresh garden bed right where that chicken run had been for the past 6 to 12 months. And you can do the same thing, obviously, with pastures, with cows and whatnot. Cows, they drop their manure. We like to follow Joel Salatin methods. I think both Connor and I are fans. Cows drop their manure. Maybe you run some sheep behind them. The sheep kind of eat the grass and cancel out some of the parasites that the cows drop, and vice versa with the cows to the sheep. And then you run chickens through, and the chickens spread out that manure and cancel out some of the other parasites.
We call that animal husbandry.
Yeah, and they also fertilize the land with their chicken manure. And you see these beautiful, beautiful green, thick fields with no chemical treatment to them.
Yeah, and
when
what's
you have good
interesting,
management.
yeah, and I looked up the topsoil, so I couldn't find a super succinct answer here, but I did see that, or concise answer, excuse me. I did see that NRDC.org said that according to the NRCS, cropland across Iowa has lost an average of 6.8 inches of topsoil since 1850. So again, doesn't sound like a lot, but it does make a massive difference. And what's interesting is, and this is where, we can give the more traditional left wing some credit. I think that they used to sound the alarm on big agriculture back in the day, and I don't mind giving credit where credit's due. Now most of the left wing has completely flipped their position on this. They are very much in the wings of Greta Thunberg and climate alarmism. But I will say that they are correct. Some of the commercial ways of farming does erode our topsoil, and but when you think about America a couple hundred years back, one of the big things that we actually saw that was natural to America was buffalo, for example. Buffalo, bison roaming across the plains, and they're going to be adding their waste to the soil, which is going to be improving upon the soil. And we even see things like, I think it was the North American beaver used to actually dam up more of our rivers, and I believe that they're not extinct, but their population has immensely decreased, and as a result, there's actually less natural ponds that come about from nature, and those ponds actually hold in a lot of the water that also keeps our soil healthy. That's why a lot of farmers will have small ponds that oftentimes they home make themselves, because that's going to be really beneficial to their ecosystem as well, and collecting rainwater. So it's just interesting to see God's design in all this, because our climate, our ecosystem here in North America was kind of geared a certain way to have some of these animals and different wildlife that contributed to the overall health of our ecosystem. And that is the one thing that I will give some, credit to the left side of the aisle. They used to at least advocate for the ending of these commercialized farming industries. Nowadays, they are still wanting an end to that, but their reasons for it have a lot less to do with real concern for Mother Earth. Now, maybe the average individual that believes in climate change might have a genuine concern, but most of the people that are pushing that movement, I'm sure they have been presented with the science behind what actually heals the earth. And guys like Joel Salatin have been ringing the fire alarm on this for a long time. What we really need is way more decentralized farms that go about using proper animal husbandry and regenerative methods, as opposed to nowadays, I believe we only have a few hundred mega farms that provide the majority of the food that you see in grocery stores. So, yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about any of that, Joey.
No, you sound spot on for me. I think it's like 3 or 4 major brands that pretty much control all the meat
Yeah.
industry in the US.
Yeah, and a lot of those are the ones that have these spontaneous explosions at their dairies and food processing places. So, um, ultimately, you could probably tell by the way that Joey and I are talking about this, we're by no means alarmists that think that that tomorrow, it's going to look like Mad Max and it's going to be a free for all, every man for himself. But there is a degree where in World War II, the American public was encouraged to grow victory gardens. And the whole purpose behind a victory garden was to help our supply chain in wartime to not have such strain, in order to provide food for all America. And I believe it was, I'd have to look it up. I had this statistic memorized at one point, but I believe it's close to about 40% of all of the food during that period was grown from these victory gardens, because the average American got out their shovel and their hoe and they went into the yard and they created a victory garden, knowing that it was going to be helping their homeland and their country. And these victory gardens, a lot of legislation has been passed where you actually can't even do some of the same type of practices that were being used during the time of these victory gardens. But either way, the point I'm getting at is we want to encourage individuals to take more autonomy over their food choices, not because you can do everything, because it's important to not be an island. We've talked a lot about that when we had C.R. Wiley on. He talked a lot about surviving the apocalypse is not going to be beans, bullets, and bunkers so much as it is high trust communities that watch out for each other. So don't worry about providing every last mean for yourself, but it is a good idea for you to expand your knowledge of these things so that you can have a little bit more autonomy, so that if there is a strain on our food system, you won't be caught unprepared, because ultimately we are believers who want to be able to care for our neighbor, and part of caring for our neighbor is being able to feed them and being able to feed ourselves so that we're not a burden to our neighbor as well.
Absolutely.
We carry each other's burdens.
Yeah, and I'd say it's just good to know where your food is coming from. And I think that's part of good stewardship. Not to say that it's a sin to eat factory farmed meat.
Right.
But I think if we're wanting to be the best stewards of what we're given, that we should treat and do with everything the best we can.
Absolutely. Well, growing up in the church, so many individuals want to talk about smoking and drinking and doing drugs as being sinful and trashing your body. But the reality is we need to start treating McDonald's in that similar way. I mean, the type of ingredients that are put into these fast foods, they'll stay with you until the day you die. Your body will never process some of these chemicals and just trash that goes into your body. So to some degree, it's not sinning for you to go to McDonald's and eat a Big Mac.
But you hear your Baptist pastor who's 300 pounds tell you can't have a beer after church.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm getting at. There are so many individuals in the pulpit who themselves are very much guilty of what we would call gluttony, honestly. And I'm not saying that they are overeating, because sometimes you don't have to overeat these type of foods to get a gut because of the type of product that's in them.
Right.
But that's where good stewardship needs to come about, because Lord knows there are some wild ingredients in some of these fast foods. I mean, Joey, is it normal to get your food from the head of a clown, or is it normal for you to pluck it from the ground, from the soil?
Let me think about that one.
So
Well,
you see my point.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We could go so deep here. We could talk too about our food causing effeminacy in our modern era too, and all the
Yeah.
soy and pseudo estrogens that are being fed to us, and what the implications of some of that could be. So
Absolutely. There's a lot there, and
it's a
unfortunately,
deep dive.
it is a deep
Just get
dive.
started with a little bit at a time, and it
Yeah.
really doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah. Well, Joey, I wanted this episode to be fun and engaging, and I think it has been. But beyond that, I want this episode to be more really practical application. So, do you have any good resources you can give our listeners for books that you've read that have really helped you, or videos to watch, documentaries, things like of that nature that could start to maybe get them down the process of
Ooh.
more food freedom?
Well, let's see. I could have a whole laundry list of things. The Back to Eden documentary is a good one if you're looking
Yep.
into gardening.
That is
and
free on
whatnot.
YouTube. Back to Eden.
That's free. Yeah. Who else has good instructional videos?
Justin Rhodes has a
Justin
lot of great
Rhodes
stuff.
has a lot of good videos. If you're looking into more, I'd say his videos focus more on the livestock versus. Well, I guess
There's
he
definitely
kind
quite
of
a bit of
does
gardening, too.
vlogs more recently, more than
A
instructional.
lot of
videos.
his stuff is vlogs, not so much instruction. He does actually have basically a Netflix for farmers, or for
Right.
homesteaders, I should say, that might be worth looking into if you have the budget for it. But either way, even his vlog videos, you do kind of learn quite a bit even from his vlogs. But yeah,
He's got a book too, which I think is kind of a pretty good. I have it. It's called The Rooted Life, and it's a good kind of basic introduction to some of that stuff. Growing your own food. That's a good one. Of course, anything by Joel Salatin if you're interested in healing the land and
one of the best
management.
ones. If you're not interested in being a commercial farmer, but you're interested in homesteading, Polyface Micro is one of the best ones out there. Sorry about the glare, but this is the Polyface Farms is Joel Salatin's farm, and it's his methods done on a homestead scale. And then this book right here, this is the Small Scale Poultry Flock by Harvey Usery, and it is one of the best chicken books that talks through everything you need to know chicken wise. And if you are wanting to get into homesteading, our good friend Dearwoke Christian said that chickens are the gateway drug for homesteading, and I happen to agree with him.
My last book too that I remembered would be John Moody's Frugal Homesteader. If you're wanting to do stuff really cheap, John Moody is your go-to guy. Yeah. I like my stuff to look a little pretty, so some of his stuff I'm not the biggest fan of as far as infrastructure and such, but he gets it done and he does it very well.
Yeah, I'm a little more like Mike John. I'm not so pretty with my stuff. I just try to get the job done, but that's where my wife balances me out. Well, Joey, I know that you have to get going, but thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Look forward to doing it again, hopefully.
Absolutely. Do you have anything to shout out or any final words of encouragement to leave the audience with?
Nothing to shout out. I'd just say go plant or grow something and maybe find a good sustainable source of meat or something of that nature. One new thing, even if it's just for this whole year. If you can do one new thing a little more sustainably, that's a win.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Joey. And thank you everyone for listening. We have been Forge and Anvil, and we will see you next time.